And now, it's time for the real news, and here's your host, Farron.
Hello and welcome to the Real News, and what a week it has been. If you're a first-time listener, we are usually on at 11 on WSIC and WDSL, but today we had to make some time changes. We are a weekly call-in broadcast where we discuss current events and politics. This week, our guest is Charlie Giles, a first responder on 9/11. Their story goes very widely unreported. They were told the air was safe to breathe. Over 200 have died, and as many as 25,000 have sicknesses relevant to their exposure on that day. He will join us after the first break, and after the interview, we will go to the phones where you, the listeners, can call in and speak your opinion on this week's events. I want to start today by commenting on the bailout travesty. I want to start by saying I am a ashamed American. I am a saddened American to have to be witness to a completely incompetent government seemingly incapable of telling the truth, much less managing our country, much less managing our finances, much less managing our military. We started reporting this financial collapse was inevitable here on the Real News back in March. Brian put a button on our website, The Collapsing Economy. But our leaders denied this obvious impending doom. All the way up to just mere weeks ago, Bush and both candidates bold-faced it to the American people and proclaimed our economy was stable and sound. While we, the actual society, are witness to the highest priced fuel ever, joblessness, runaway influx of illegal aliens, rising food prices, and plants closing such as Canac in Statesville did this very week, throwing 550 people out of work. Where are they supposed to get jobs at in this collapsing economy? And still, our so-called leaders even denied we were in recession. And now our government has the gall, the audacity, to ask the struggling middle class to bail out the very elite rich Wall Street fat cats that, because of their insatiable greed, are the cause of this to begin with. But the real culprit, as we have stated before, is the Federal Reserve. We are supposed to be capitalist, remember? And in a capitalist society, everyone has the right to fail. If my business fails, the government for sure isn't going to bail me out. Capitalism should never mean that those that pay their bills and plays by the rules and wisely don't overextend themselves have to pay out for those that don't. I reject the bailout. The bailout is fascism, corporate-owned government and government-owned corporations. I hope that you all will see the complete failure of our leadership in this country. Our country is pushing $11 trillion past bankrupt and have promised over $50 trillion of entitlements in the coming years. It cannot succeed based on a currency backed by thin air. So it is going to fail. The only question is when. Are we to believe that the very ones that created the collapse are now so miraculously smart enough to fix it? I ask, I pray, everyone wake up and demand a government that represents us, we the people, a true government. Am I alone? Don't we deserve a government that actually works for us, we the people? And I want to turn to Brian and see what he thinks about this bailout, and after that we will go to a break and we'll have Mr. Giles on our guest.
Reading the excerpts and headlines from various articles this week, it almost seems like Halloween came early this year, or at least to Wall Street. The Washington Post. Prominent executives say this will all end in either riots in the streets or in a bloodbath. The Economist. Global financial firms being fed into the wood chipper. New York Times. Death and near-death experiences on Wall Street. Reuters. This crisis has been a beast of biblical proportions. And The Economist. Nightmare on Wall Street. The goblins and ghouls of elite society have certainly been active this week, like proverbial cockroaches rummaging about at night while the people sleep, feasting on their wealth. But what does this all mean for the generally apathetic, uninformed, self-indulging, and debt-ridden Americans who are being barraged by the fear-mongering and manipulative tactics of mainstream media in Washington? It means the American taxpayer is being force-fed a multi-trillion-dollar regurgitated pile of Wall Street's rancid stool, and quite frankly, I'm disgusted by its foul stench permeating my wallet once again. $700 billion for the bailout, another $25 billion now being proposed for the automakers, and talk of the FDIC needing over $400 billion to cover deposits adequately. Where does it end? Who's next? The airlines, the shipping industry? Just how much money can the Fed print before the unavoidable collapse of the entire financial system occurs? Perhaps Wall Street is merely seeking a return on their investments. After all, a plethora of financial firms have invested billions into Washington over the past century, fueling hundreds of various political campaigns, exotic travel destinations, and undoubtedly tens of thousands of champagne-saturated meals. Even Secretary Paulson himself emerged from none other than Goldman Sachs. The same strategy certainly worked out wonderfully for the military-industrial complex, which lobbied for war and was eventually rewarded handsomely for their investments in the largest brothel on earth, the U.S. Congress. We here at the Real News Radio have been exposing the inherently evil Federal Reserve system, central banking Ponzi scheme, since we went live March 1st. History has proven time and time again that central banks inevitably consume societies like a gargantuan tapeworm. America, you have become fashionably antiquated. Put down your remote controls, your 32-ounce cans of beer, your iPods, and your credit cards, and get with the times. Sport a newer, more contemporary look with a pitchfork and a torch. And instead of making your weekly pilgrimage to the local supermall or discount retailer, visit your local branch of the Federal Reserve, fulfilling your moral, patriotic, and God-given mission to defend liberty.
That's Brian's blog, and that is always posted on our website. Our website's therealnewsradio.com. You can email us at onair@therealnewsradio.com. We're going to take a break now, and we'll come back with our guest, Charlie Giles of thefeelgoodfoundation.com. Back on The Real News, and today we're going to go ahead and go to our phones, and our phone number is 336-998-9375. We're going to talk about the proposed bailout and what's happened this week in our economy. And the future of our children, and I would like to start by reading just a little bit of the verbiage in the Bush proposed bailout, and this was being rejected by Congress, but we'll go ahead and read it because we're not sure exactly how it's going to turn out. Decisions by the Secretary pursuant to the authority of this Act are non-reviewable and committed to agency discretion and may not be reviewed by any court of law or any administrative agency. In short, the so-called mother of all bailouts, which will transfer $700 billion taxpayer dollars to purchase the distressed assets of several failed financial institutions, will be conducted in a manner unchallengeable by the courts and ungovernable by the people's duly sworn representatives. Now, if you don't understand that, let that sink in. They're saying that this will be unchallengeable by any courts and ungovernable by the people's duly sworn representatives, our congressmen and our senators. All decision-making power will be consolidated in the executive branch, who, we remind you, will have the incentive to act upon this privilege as quickly as possible before they leave office. The measure will run up the budget deficit by a significant amount. We got a phone call. Hey, you're on The Real News. No, the Home Ed Show hasn't been on Saturday for about 6 months. It's only on Monday through Friday. The measure will run up the budget deficit by a significant amount with no guarantee of recouping the outlay and no fundamental means of holding those who fail to do so accountable. So we want to discuss the bailout this week and what the listeners might think about it. I'd like to put my 2 cents in right now. We can't feed and clothe all Americans' children, but we can afford $60 billion to bail out Bear Stearns. We can't provide decent medical care to American seniors, but we can give $85 billion to AIG Insurance. We can't lift one finger to help out Americans losing their homes, but we can hand over up to $1 trillion to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. We haven't the funds to provide proper care and support to American veterans, but we can afford up to $600 billion to buy pledged Lehman Brothers assets.